Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
Welcome everybody, Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, and it's great to be with you today. Yes, and it's wonderful to be with you. I had a great week here in the dojo. Had some great guests, Pat Flynn, Christine Flynn. We just had William Hemsworth yesterday, and today the show is a fantastic show in store for you because we're going to talk about a remarkable relic that I think is just fascinating in and of itself, but it's also one of those wonderful tools that we can use for those who believe that pretty much anything that exists is material. There's nothing beyond materiality, materialist. So they don't see the supernatural. They don't see any supernatural causality in the world. Well, you could bring up a whole list of how being a God believer has items that make sense to us but doesn't make sense to materialists. For example, philosophical proofs for the existence of God, the resurrection, Marian apparitions, Mary's apparition of Fatima, for example, Eucharistic miracles, all sorts of things. And we had Pat Flynn on earlier this week. He gave a wonderful little short list of all these weird things that appear weird, obviously, to those who don't believe in God, but makes perfect sense to God believers. One item on that list is what we're going to talk about today, and that is the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin, this remarkable cloth with the image of Christ that has, it's probably the most studied religious object in history, and it is the most perplexing in that it is unexplainable. And to help us look at the Shroud of Turin, what is it? What tests done on it? The importance of it, and maybe even if we have time, how the Shroud of Turin relates to another image of the Divine Mercy. We're going to have our good friend Father Chris Alar come on, and he's going to talk about the Shroud of Turin. And without further ado, let me give him a shout outs to all of you watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. And hello, everybody. Yeah, wow, what an emoji explosion this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you, gang. It's good to see the social section of the dojo is alive and ready to do their workouts. Also, I want to welcome all of you listening on radio around the country and around the world via podcast through our flagship website, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org, or, our handy-dandy phone app. So welcome aboard, everybody. It's great to be with you. So, yeah, we're going to talk about the Shroud of Turin on the other side of the break. And as always, we have our critical thinking exercises. We have our finding the fallacy. Although it's Friday, we're going to do an informal fallacy just because since we had some in-studio guests this week, we kind of missed a bunch of them. So I figured, why not just do an informal fallacy? Today's finding the fallacy, by the way, is the Argumentum at Baculum. So there's a nice little cliffhanger. What in the world is that? And also we meet an early church father who is Caelestius. So great stuff in store for us. And also I want to thank everybody. Thank you for the boost of views and subscriptions to my project, which is the Apocrypha Apocalypse Project. We have unleashed the Apocrypha Apocalypse on the public, and it's getting subscriptions, we're getting views of our videos, and that's to defend the Deuterocanon, answer objections. I think it's going to be an influential corner of the web because there's just nothing out there like it. So if you haven't checked out, please do. Just type in the search engine Apocrypha Apocalypse, or you might be able to get through it by my name. And if you can, if you like it, please like it. If you want to subscribe, please do, because exposure is important. And of course, the same thing's true with here. I always say we need to do apologetics in place and use social media to help spread the word of God, help people defend the faith, find answers for those objections they may have about Christ's church. And so please, if you haven't subscribed to Hands on Apologetics here on YouTube or elsewhere, please like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Still cannot find it on YouTube. Okay, well, Michelle, I don't know why. Let me spell it for you. It's Apocrypha, Apocrypha, Apocalypse. And you could spell that. Let's see if I could type it correctly. And just put that in the search engine. You might need to scroll down a little bit, but you'll see my picture, and that's the channel. If you still can't find it, go to my website, which is handsonapologetics.com. Oops, I misspelled that. Sorry about that. handsonapologetics.com. And just there, I have a page there called the Apocrypha Apocalypse. Just click on that, and you'll find a link to the website. So, hey, thanks. I appreciate it, Michelle. Thank you for the effort. And thank all of you who have visited it. Really appreciate it. All right. Enough about me. Let's jump into our exercises. And the exercise today is finding the fallacy, the Argumentum ad Baculum, which is the appeal to force. The appeal to force. So this is one of those fallacies that just so happen to have a Latin name that's known by. And as you can tell, committing this fallacy is when one makes an appeal to force or the threat of force to bring about the acceptance of a conclusion. One participates in the Argumentum ad Baculum when one points out the negative consequences of holding the contrary position, namely that you will suffer pain. I added that last part, but you could kind of read between the lines with a fallacy like that. No, it's baculum with a B, not vacuum. Okay. Yeah, it means force. And does this happen in apologetics? It does. If you're in Islamic apologetics, YouTube has a lot of some very knowledgeable Protestant apologists who rather forcefully do apologetics with Muslims. And it's not unusual to see this particular fallacy being used by Muslims. The threat of force, this is true, and if you don't agree with me or you disagree with me, bad things are going to happen. So I got to stop looking at the chat room. It's cracking me up. So anyway, I think that's pretty much the only area. I'm sure nowadays you probably run into it just because social media has become very, very contentious. And so I wouldn't doubt if people would try to substitute arguments and evidence with threats of violence or threats of force. So just be aware, if someone does that, just aware they're committing this particular fallacy. And I don't know. I'm not sure if someone tries the threat of force, you can just point out what they're doing and say, look, the thing that really threatens me is arguments and evidence. So, prove your case. And if you can't prove it, then, don't be threatening people, I guess. All right, so that's our finding of fallacy for today. Let's jump to the early church father for today, to meet the early church father, who is Caelestius, who died sometime around AD 429. Caelestius probably was of Italian origin, is found in Rome about the year 405, where he is a firm disciple of Pelagius. Now, Pelagius, as you know, is the arch heretic of the heresy of Pelagianism, which essentially denied the original sin and said basically that Adam left us a bad example. And so Christ came to give a good example so that by our own good works, without the aid of grace, we can do what is pleasing before God and, in a sense, earn our salvation. So he was a disciple of Pelagius. With the latter, he went to Carthage in 410, Remaining there when Pelagius went on to Palestine, he was convicted as a heretic by the African synods in 411 and 412, and went to Ephesus, where he was ordained to the priesthood, and then to Constantinople. In 417 and 18, he went back to Rome, where he shared in the condemnation of Pelagius by Pope Innocent I in the former year and Pope Zosimus in the latter. In 418, following the condemnation by Zosimus, Caelestius was obliged by imperial edict to leave Rome and return to Constantinople, and it is probably in the latter place that he died. No trace of him is found after the year 429 AD. Of his considerable writings, Jurgen's Faith of the Early Fathers says only fragments are preserved. And so this is very typical of the early church fathers, especially those who are condemned of heresy, that they only exist in fragments. Nevertheless, from these fragments, we can get an idea of what he was arguing. And yes, he was a thorough Pelagian. I love early church fathers like Caelestius because we look around today and we think, wow, the church is in a worse shape than it's ever been in its history. Well, here you have a guy who's espousing this heresy, being condemned by councils, and then getting ordained, and then traveling to centers of Christianity like Constantinople and then, of course, Rome, where eventually he is condemned. So it's like, there's just not one pristine age of the church. The church is always comprised of wheat and chaff. And that is our early church father for today, Caelestius. And coming up on the other side of the break, we're going to talk with Father Chris Alar about the Shroud of Turin. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
Hebrews 11:3 says, "By faith we come to understand." According to St. Augustine, understanding is the reward of faith. Therefore, seek not to understand that you may believe, but believe that you may understand. May God grant us a strong living faith in Him and His divine plan of salvation, and help us to believe so that we may understand.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy?
Or will it be a girl? We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president?
Or maybe a doctor. Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888 526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands on Apologetics. And we're going to talk about one of the most mysterious relics out there, and that is the Shroud of Turin. Like I said, if you're going to do dialogues with people, non-believers, with people who are interested in Christianity in general, sometimes it's great to have a number of different things that you can bring up that the Catholic worldview completely understands and can explain, like Marian apparitions, all sorts of stuff, near-death experiences. And I think near the top of that list needs to be the Shroud of Turin. And to talk about this wonderful and mysterious relic, we have Father Chris Alar with us. Father Chris Alar, M.I.C., is a priest of the Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception. Father Chris wrote and produced the popular Divine Mercy 101 and Explaining the Faith DVD series. He is the author of the best-selling book, After Suicide, There's Hope for Them and for You. He is also a regular host and guest on EWTN, and he's the host of online Divine Mercy Matters series at divinemercymatters.org. He serves as Father Joseph, M.I.C., the director of Association of Marian Helpers, and he is the head of Marian Press, located on the grounds of the National Shrine of the Divine Mercy in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And Father Chris, welcome to Hands on Apologetics.
Thank you, Gary. Sorry, I didn't realize my camera had the top of my head cut off, so sorry about that.
No problem. Hey, those watching on live feed, I'm sure they wish that my camera was doing that. So it's great to have you on board.
No, thank you.
Yeah, Father, it's funny because my brother was putting together a list of YouTube videos that he wanted to give to some friends who were struggling with their belief in God. And he suggested yours, and I watched your video on the Shroud of Turin, and I thought it was exceptional. So thank you so much for doing that.
Oh, thank you. It is a beautiful relic of our faith that science has done everything to try to disprove. And, it's just like the Bible itself, with everything from Adam and Eve, where, genetically now we've proven that all living human beings can be traced back to one common ancestor, to the evidence of a great flood 5,000 years ago that suddenly swept over the Black Sea, where Noah would have been, all the way to the fact that a person could be swallowed by a sperm whale, and Jonah was in the Mediterranean, and science said, well, there's no way that could have been true because there are no whales in the Mediterranean. Well, they found out that actually there used to be, and the Romans hunted them to extinction. So the bottom line is, you can't find anywhere where science has disproven the Bible. And I think it's the same way with the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, why don't we start at the beginning? What exactly is the Shroud of Turin?
Well, it's interesting because the Shroud of Turin in our Catholic or our Christian tradition is the burial cloth of Christ. And we know that in so many traditions in our Christian or Catholic faith, it takes just that, faith. And what a lot of people say is, well, show me the scientific evidence. Well, there's been no disproving of the scientific evidence, but what the relic of something like the Shroud of Turin does is it gives us an opportunity to bridge the gap between scientific empirical evidence and a faith in things unseen, and that's basically what it is. It's having a faith in things unseen. And so with the Shroud of Turin, we have an excellent example of what we believe to be the burial cloth of Christ. It's a burned image of a man about 5'10", 5'11", about 175 pounds, that, and depending on the time we have, that they have actually been able to show, to place it in a time and location that was commensurate with Christ being crucified in Jerusalem in the first century. So this is the beautiful, what I keep calling a relic of our faith, but it's more than that. I think it's a living icon like the image of divine mercy, because we have in it the image of Christ. And the science tells us that that's not painted. The image is not made of brush strokes or any kind of pigment like paint. In fact, it can't be duplicated. And they said the only thing that could have made such an image was a great burst of light. And when we think of the resurrection, what would be the first thing that comes to our mind is a great burst of light.
Yeah.
And so this is all, in many, many ways, faith meeting reason. And that's exactly what we have in our Catholic tradition.
Yeah. Fantastic point. So the image itself can't be reproduced. It's definitely not a painting. It's a burned image, so to speak, or that there must have been a tremendous explosion of energy to create the image.
Exactly.
It's very tangential, isn't it? Like it's not very detailed, at least to the naked eye.
Yeah. And, the whole powerful message in this is it does take faith to believe in it. We don't have official papers that came with it that said that it goes back to this time and place of Christ's crucifixion. But, it really kind of does, in the sense that they found pollen on the cloth, and that pollen goes back centuries. In fact, some of the plants that produced the pollen that were found on the shroud went extinct in the 1st century. So how could that pollen of a plant that went extinct in the 1st century be on the shroud? That would mean that it had to have been in existence at least in that time frame, or otherwise that pollen wouldn't have, continued, without explanation. And so we know that it can be traced to the place of Jerusalem, in the sense that it was, it contains some pollens that are only native to Israel. And in fact, some of those plants that the pollen was discovered only bloom in the springtime. And some of those plants are only known to be in the Holy Land region. And so I think you could safely say that through science, we've placed it into the area where Christ would have been. Now, what about the time? Well, again, some of the plants were 1st century plants that went extinct. But one of the better arguments I've read and learned about, I know the Jacksons, who do a lot of the research on the shroud out in Colorado, and they came to our house actually and did a presentation on the shroud. And what's fascinating is they actually blew up an image of the face with the NASA VP8 image analyzer. And when they blew up an image on the face, they actually were able to see 2 coins placed in the eye sockets. Now, the reason that coins were placed back in the ancient times was because of rigor mortis. A body would have some after effects after death of rigor mortis, and sometimes the eyes, could you imagine you're at a funeral and the eyes all of a sudden open up. And so they would place coins on the eyes. Now, what's fascinating about this particular image, which we believe is Jesus Christ, is when they blew up the image, they could actually see the inscription on the coins in the eye sockets of this image. And believe it or not, you can read this up. The Jacksons have spoken about this and others. The image that's on those coins actually are coins that were produced and minted under the authority of Pontius Pilate. And that particular coin had a design that they know from historical records was a design that was minted under Pontius Pilate between 29 and 32 AD. Which means those coins would have been in circulation at the time of Christ's crucifixion. that would be like you walking around with a quarter in your pocket that was minted 3 years ago. And these coins were laid in the eye sockets, and they were able to blow that up and see it. So what an amazing story.
Yeah, so you got 2 data points that point to the same general time and area of the pollen, and also the images of the coin.
Yes.
That's fascinating. You mentioned this, and maybe I don't know if we have enough time. We could certainly pick it up on the other side of the break. But blowing up the face with that imager, that's another very interesting feature of the Shroud, is that it's not just a 2-dimensional image. It encodes depth as well. Yeah, the 3D imagery was captured again by that NASA VP8 image analyzer. And what they said is every image has, depending upon how it's taken, either 2D or 3D information. And what they found was that this image, when analyzed, actually contains 3D imagery information, which means that it was formed in a 3-dimensional way as the cloth contoured into the face. That this was not a flat painted, because if you were to take the image of a cloth and paint it on, it would not form that 3D image of the face. And so for us to see that, it's absolutely incredible. And in fact, the real story of the Shroud began in the late 1890s with a professional, I think, photographer named Secondo Pia, who was an Italian photographer. And we know that famous image of the Shroud, that there's one that's much lighter and hard to see, and there's one that's it's an inverse, and it's much darker but clearer to the naked eye. And when he took that picture, he was blown away by the fact that when he took the picture, the negative, which when you take, if you remember, you do along with me probably, the old Kodak days, remember we used to get the negatives inside the picture package, and they would be those ghosted out images, and those were the negatives. And what happens when you take a picture of something, the thing you take the picture of is a positive. So when you take a picture of it, you get a negative. Now, the fascinating thing about the Shroud is when they took a picture of it, the Secondo Pia, what he got was a positive. Now, that's unlike anything they ever saw in history and have never duplicated since then. What that means is the thing they took a picture of is actually a negative, which means the negative thing they took the picture of is actually a picture of something. And we believe that's right. Yep, I hear the music. We're chatting with Father Chris Alar about the Shroud. More to come on the other side of the break. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. It's www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR. Live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
If you shop on Amazon.com, there's an easy way to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Just visit smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center under the desired charity. Now, when you log into your Amazon account and purchase products, a portion of it will automatically go to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio at no cost to you. Thanks in advance for supporting CRC and VMPR, and may God richly bless you and your family.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Father Chris Alar of the Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception about the Shroud of Turin. And Father, we're dating ourselves talking about negatives. But you know what's really fascinating, if you think about it, is that what medieval forgery would construct an image that could only be truly revealed by 20th, 21st century technology, with the 3D imaging and even just photography with negatives. They wouldn't have a clue about that stuff in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, and as I apologize, I went long on your break there, but when Secundo Pia took the picture and it came back a positive, what that means is what he took the picture of, aka the shroud, is actually a negative. Now, that's impossible because everything you touch is a positive. The cell phone is a positive. And so what that means is what he took a picture of is actually a negative. Well, what does that mean? That means the shroud is a picture of something because itself is a negative. So that means that the shroud is an actual picture of something, and we believe that picture is the image of Christ. It burned an image, if you will, onto that cloth. And you just mentioned Middle Ages. A lot of people came back and said, well, it was a Middle Ages forgery because of that 1988 carbon testing that said the shroud was a hoax. But, Gary, if I could say real quickly, the creator himself of carbon testing said that the test done on the shroud was very shoddy. And because only one sample was taken and it was way too small. And, the people in the Middle Ages held it. There's pictures, there's paintings of people in the Middle Ages holding the image itself. And so their fingerprints, the carbon from your fingers could have gotten onto the edges. And so what happened in the year 2000 is photos of the sample were sent to labs, and they said that these samples were rewoven. And that made sense that the cloth had rewoven parts after that fire. They were added back on after there was a fire in 1532. And that fire, the Jacksons say that test was skewed because of the carbon monoxide. And so another thing is those samples they sent had cotton, gum, and dye, but the main linen of the main body cloth had none of this. So, we look at it, and the head of the team in 1988 later said that the sample that was tested was different from the rest of the cloth. So I think you got to look at that and say, hey, science shows since 2005, all evidence has supported something totally different than what they declared as a hoax.
Yeah, unfortunately, the announcement back in the 80s is that which kind of sticks in people's memory. They remember, it was tested, it was a fraud, we can forget about it. But unfortunately, like the revelations that have happened since then about, like you said, that it's not a pristine sample, it was taken by a non-representative portion of the shroud. Unfortunately, that doesn't have the same mass appeal as that original declaration.
Right. And we have to understand that what went into that original finding was misinformation. It's you can't make an accurate scientific determination based on inaccurate data. So I think it's time that the world knows that we need to relook at what that piece that was tested really was. And that was touched in the Middle Ages by fingers with carbon, and a lot of people said that it was rewoven. So there you go. After the fire of the early 1500s, the nuns sewed swatches back onto it. So I think we have our answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And you point out in the video very nicely that in addition to that, we have evidence that goes earlier than the date that they pointed out in the 1980s test that of the shroud's existence. So how could the shroud exist before it supposedly was made?
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence in writings, even drawings of members of the church holding this herringbone weaved pattern. One of the things that's very important about the weave of the pattern is that weave that we call a herringbone weave was one that they used in very fine linen of the first century in Palestine, a very unique kind of weave. And the Jacksons go so far as to say that this may have also been used as the tablecloth in the Last Supper. And so it's very fascinating because the fine linen that would have been used has this particular herringbone pattern that we have pictures from the 700s, drawings from the 700s that show the same cloth with the same herringbone weave. So right there, the test said it goes back to the 1200s. Well, they have 500 years evidence before that shows people holding that cloth, at least in drawings. We didn't have photographs, but we did have paintings and drawings.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's the shroud is almost like the Energizer Bunny. No matter what people try to throw at it, it just keeps going and going. Carbon testing, all these other things. What other remarkable features are on the shroud?
Well, for me, one of the ones that stood out the most was the image of the man on the shroud. They actually give verification to the same marks and wounds that we read about in the Gospels. So the way that he was scourged, there actually is the marks on the head that would have indicated a crowning with some thorns. Actually, it would have been an entire helmet, not just a wrap around the edge, but more like an entire helmet. And what's interesting is the man on the shroud was both scourged and crucified. Now, the only evidence we have in human history of a man being both scourged and crucified is Jesus Christ. And the reason why is because the ancient Romans, if they were going to crucify someone, they didn't scourge him usually because he would have been too weak to be able to endure his passion to go through the crucifixion. So they didn't scourge him. Now, for the other criminals that didn't commit a crime as bad, they were usually scourged but not crucified because they wanted to teach them a lesson, but they didn't deserve full capital punishment. So the interesting thing is this man in the shroud was both scourged and crucified, whereas the only other human in history that we know of that endured both was Jesus Christ. So we have that bit of evidence as well that I think is extremely powerful piece of information. And the marks, like even in the crucifixion, there's that ongoing argument if he was nailed in the hands or the wrists. And the shroud, which has our Lord's hands folded over, shows the back, and in the wrist there is the mark Okay, now there's two theories on that mark, because whenever Jesus appears in an apparition and you see his palms, the marks are in the palm, but yet on the shroud, they show up in the back of the wrist. Now there's two arguments for that. There is, and actually even in the front, the argument is that when the blood would have poured down from the mark on the wrist, it could have pooled, in the palm, it could have pooled in the wrist because there's a natural indentation in both sides of the wrist where blood could have flowed down and pooled, where the rest of the blood dried, but there would have been a pool, a little mark of collected blood. Yeah. But I think the more compelling argument is there is some information now that the way the people were crucified was that the nail was driven through the palm, but at an angle so that it went through the wrist and exited out the back of the wrist.
Interesting.
Because that bone would have held the body on the cross. So it makes perfect sense if we see in the front hand of the images, Christ has his wounds in the palm, but when you see the back of his hand, like on the shroud, we see the wound in the wrist. Because if he was nailed at an angle and it went through the palm at an angle, it would have exited the wrist. And the shroud is commensurate with that. So I find that also to be very valid scientific evidence of how a person would have been crucified that backs the marks that we see on the shroud.
Yeah, that's interesting. So really what we're viewing on the shroud is the exit wound of his hands, yes, not the entrance wounds. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, so like you said, so you have that correspondence of being tortured and crucified. You have the wound marks, which aren't typical of what we see in depictions of the crucifixion. Also, even the crown of thorns, too, right? Usually it's the small blade of thorns, but they probably just used like a bush, right? A large thorn.
And it would have been easily described as a crown, because crowns then were sometimes the full crowning over the whole head. It wasn't just the crown that went around in a strip. So we could understand why the word crown would have been used, even though it would have been more of the helmet type of design. And that's what the shroud shows. And the shroud shows, even for instance, in the Divine Mercy image, where we have the blood and the water coming from our Lord's heart, we actually see in the shroud the blood and the water that pooled in the image came from the heart.
Yeah, very good. We're chatting with Father Chris Alar about the Shroud of Turin. Stay tuned. Yeah, Father, I want to talk about the Divine Mercy.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tyr and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you.
Jesus said in Luke 17, "When you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are unprofitable servants. We have only done our duty.'" According to St. John of the Cross, God is pleased with the little deeds we do in secret. He takes more pleasure in these than in a multitude of grand works that we may do out of the desire to be seen by others. May God help us to do the things that please Him, and not just to appear great in the eyes of others.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, Hands-On Apologetics. And we're having great discussion on the Shroud of Turin with Father Chris Alar. And Father, you anticipated my next question because, with the Divine Mercy movement, we have the image of Divine Mercy. I was curious, what things does the Shroud of Turin have in common with the Divine Mercy image?
Yeah, the beautiful thing was back in 1996, Father Seraphim Menkelenko, one of our priests, discovered, working with the Life Foundation, a connection at a conference where the image of Divine Mercy was present, and so was the Shroud of Turin image. And the people who were there in the conference seemed to see this similarity. Father Seraphim was present, and that kind of opened a curious investigation of looking at, was there a similarity between the image on the shroud and the image of Divine Mercy? Now remember, the image of Divine Mercy was painted by the early 1930s, completely freehand, with only the direction of St. Faustina. There was no model or drawing. He had no picture of the shroud. Our understanding is he never ever saw a picture of the shroud his whole life. But what is fascinating is when you take the two images and you plot out the main points of the face, you can do the distance of the eye sockets, the length of the bridge of the nose, the width, the eyebrows, the cheekbones, and all the essence of the human face structure was pointed out and mapped in Rome. So Father Seraphim took it to Rome to be mapped and plotted, and they did the same thing with the image on the shroud. And what they found out was fascinating. It is a 99.9% perfect match. And
wow.
You could not draw something that close in an exact match freehand. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Even if you were tracing the image, as we were kids, we would put a thin paper over a picture and we would trace it. This is something that Eugene Kazmarowski never did in creating of the image, but it is fascinating. And when you put the two up against each other, you can see, and we have a whole presentation of the image, as you saw in my video on YouTube. If anybody would like to see it, it's called Explaining the Faith, the Shroud of Turin and Divine Mercy image. And it's on YouTube. It's under my name, Father Chris Alar, so A-L-A-R. And that Explaining the Faith series, this is just one talk. I did other talks on Mary, confession, communion, suffering, angels, prayer, how to pray, purgatory, the Bible. But this particular video showed that connection between the shroud, and I gave a history of the shroud and its connection with that image of Divine Mercy. And for me, the big one was the blood and water in the Divine Mercy image coming from the heart. And what's fascinating is the theologian that works here for me at the Shrine of Divine Mercy, he actually did his thesis on the topic of the blood of the blood and the water that came out of Christ's side in Scripture. Now, a lot of people will argue and say, well, if it says in Scripture the blood and water came out of the Christ's side, the image of divine mercy shows it coming from his heart. So what gives? Well, the answer, according to Dr. Stackpole, is that when Christ was speared on the cross, the spear, the Romans were trained executioners, and they knew exactly where to spear an enemy on the battlefield or a criminal on the cross. They knew right where to slide the spear that it would go through the chest cavity and puncture the heart. So when Jesus was speared on the cross, the spear actually went through his chest cavity and punctured his heart. And from that, in Scripture tells us, came the blood and the water. What's interesting, fascinating, is on the shroud, you can see where the heart is, and there's a pool of blood and water that accumulated that is on the shroud that came from his heart. And that can scientifically be explained as well due to the different serum and the different types of fluids that come from the human heart, that it did consist of blood and water. So we have that real connection between the image and the shroud, between the facial features and the blood and the water coming from the heart, and even the proportions of the man in both images are commensurate.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and also, the image of divine mercy, of course, came right around the same time as we started developing technology to kind of flesh out things about the Shroud of Turin as well. So there is a kind of connection there in terms of technology.
Yeah, and when you look at the technology we use to compare the similarities between the facial features, it's utterly amazing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know about that. Well, you brought up divine mercy. I want to spend a couple of minutes to talk about your ministry. You have some great videos on YouTube, and tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, we invite anybody who can join our YouTube channel. You can subscribe free of charge. It's called Divine Mercy, and it comes here from Stockbridge. We got great videos of Father Don Calloway, Father Mike Gately, myself, and other Marians. And I just finished I'm ongoing a 20-part series that I made 20 different videos that they're all on YouTube called Explaining the Faith. And two of the first ones I ever did were Divine Mercy 101, part 1 and part 2. And in it, I get into all this detail about the connection of divine mercy. And then I did a walkthrough of the Mass, walking you through literally every step of the Mass and explaining where God's mercy is found. And, the reason I'm a Marian is because there are two spiritual weapons of our times. And, God said that where sin abounds, grace abounds even the more. And what we have in this day and world of unprecedented sin is unprecedented grace. And it's a time of mercy. It's a time that God has given us to turn to him. And he says, now is the time of mercy. You don't pass through the doors of my mercy. You must pass through the doors of my justice. And I don't know about you all, but I'm not going to make it through the doors of justice. I need the doors of mercy. And so God gives us an opportunity in this time of mercy to turn back to him. And he gives us two spiritual weapons, Mary and the message and devotion of divine mercy. And there's only one religious community in the world that is so dedicated to spreading those two messages. And that is the Marians of the Immaculate Conception. That's who we are, whose apostolate is spreading the message and devotion of divine mercy. So that's why I'm here, because Mary and divine mercy are the answer to all our ills. It's just the world doesn't see it yet, and we're trying our doggonedest to get that message out there.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job. Here on the show, I tell my audience that even though with COVID, you're stationed in place, you could do apologetics in place with social media. What could the audience do to kind of help spread the message of divine mercy?
Yeah, please join our daily live streams. We have been utterly amazed at the results. Every day we broadcast the 9 o'clock morning mass Eastern time, so it's 9 a.m. Eastern time. And myself and Father Kaz, we alternate homily days, and we just give that feeding to the sheep of the teachings of mercy and Mary. We're very orthodox. We're very thorough in our teachings that come from the official church teachings of the magisterium. We also offer the chaplet of Divine Mercy every day at 3 o'clock live streamed, and the rosary every day at 5 o'clock live streamed. But I'd love to invite everybody to attend every Saturday at 11 o'clock Eastern time. So that's you're 3 hours behind us, correct?
Yeah.
So 8 hours. 8 o'clock in the morning, California time, you could join us for our live stream called Explaining the Faith. And like I said, we've gotten over 2 million views already between Facebook and YouTube on that series. And so we're very grateful, and we're going to keep going. We're this week, please join us on Saturday. My topic will be how to bring our loved ones back to the church. Some really good practical guides on how you can bring your loved one back to a faith and belief in God and practicing that faith through attending church. So we're going to give you some great practical advice on how to bring your loved ones back to the grace of God.
Beautiful. Now, Father, how can people hook into that? You said it was on Facebook, or?
Yep, there's 3 ways. We invite you to join us any one of the 3 ways. If you're on YouTube, you can just go to our YouTube channel called Divine Mercy. Now, if you're a Facebook user, it's just as easy. Go to Divine Mercy Official. So if you go on Facebook, it's Divine Mercy Official. Or if you just like the good old-fashioned web, where you type in a web address and there it is, click on the video, you can visit us at thedivinemercy.org. So again, YouTube, just please visit Divine Mercy channel. If you're on Facebook, please visit Divine Mercy Official. And if you just prefer the web, go to thedivinemercy.org, and you can follow the links that will help you view the video.
Very good. Oh, that's exciting. Father, I'll have to have you back on the program because, all those topics, that is so needed today.
You could do one for each one because, as I said, some of the more popular ones were angels. My End Time series got over 500,000 views alone. What is the Catholic view of the end times? Do we believe in the Antichrist? Do we believe in the rapture? Do we believe in this? Do we believe in that? And so it was quite an eye-opening experience getting that much feedback and viewership there on the social media. So yeah, if you again want to enjoy the Explaining the Faith series, you can just go to our YouTube channel again called Divine Mercy, and it's under our playlists. And Father Chris Explaining the Faith, you can watch all of that for free. So we hope you join us.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. That's Father Chris Alar. And yeah, check out thedivinemercy.org. Great stuff. And talk about great stuff. Coming up next, we have the Terry and Jesse Show with High Impact Catholic Talk coming out with you. It's time for me to shut down the Midwest Command Center here, turn off the dojo lights. Thank you so much for listening. And God willing, we'll be back again Monday to do this thing we call Hands on Apologetics. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church, so I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.